Hey guys, Stephanie with AmericanMuscle.com here with my review of the Roush Cold Air Intake Kit available for 2015 and up Mustang V6s. The Roush Cold Air Kit is going to be for the S550 V6 owners out there who are looking for some performance gains. A cold air intake is normally one of the first mods that many Mustang owners go to, but there are a lot of different choices out there between airbox style and whether to go with a tune-required intake or not. The Roush intake is one of the options that's available out there right now that brings some of the most benefits to the table, but without requiring a tune. So speaking of gains, let's break the numbers down first before getting into the intake. We already ran a baseline run and got some numbers in the books, so we're going to run the car again with the Roush installed. Now we did pair a 93 Octane BAMA performance tune with the intake, even though the intake does not require a tune, but we wanted to see the full potential that the intake has. A cold air intake by itself will only net a few horsepower at the end of the day, and we're talking single digits here, so even if an aftermarket intake does not necessarily require a tune, we always recommend a tune if you're looking for any gains or improvements from your Mustang. Our baseline run with our 2015 V6 gave us numbers of 241 horsepower and 235 foot-pounds of torque at the rear wheels. With the Roush intake and the 93 Octane BAMA performance tune, the car made 261 horsepower and 250 foot-pounds of torque, making for a peak gain of 20 horsepower and 15 foot-pounds of torque. Now keep in mind that we did pair the intake with that tune, so a lot of these gains can definitely be attributed to that tune. And I always say this, but peak gains are nice to know, but the real thing that I look for is going to be the differences throughout the curve or in your driving RPMs, which is what you're actually going to notice performance-wise when you're driving. And throughout the curve, we're seeing gains of 22 horsepower in the 6,400 RPM range and 19 foot-pounds of torque right in the 6,400 RPM range as well. These are obviously both high-end gains here, and like I just said, just keep in mind that a lot of the gains that we're seeing are due to the tune that we pair with the intake. So with this intake, we're seeing power and torque being made at the top where the factory air intake system and filter become restrictive. Without a tune, like I said before, you'll see a 2 to 3 horsepower gain, but you also have to keep in mind that the more you mod your car, the more restrictive the factory air intake becomes. Another thing to point out here is the large intake filter, which I'll talk about in a minute. Let's look a little bit more at the intake itself. The first thing I noticed was that the filter is actually pretty large and bigger than the other filters that I've seen for other cold air intake setups. And we definitely noticed the benefits of this larger filter on the dyno. It is a reusable, high-flow, dry air filter, which is nice because when it gets dirty, you can clean it and reinstall it and not have to worry about the re-oiling process. The intake also fits really nicely, and I think it looks better under the hood than the stock airbox does for sure. Another cool thing here, and one of the big things that I wanted to point out with this intake, is the airbox. This is important because the airbox does still keep the air feed from the grill, which actually brings in air from outside the car. This is both unusual and nice to see from an open element airbox because it does bring in the cooler air from outside the engine compartment. I like the fact that they have tapped into that factory cold air duct because it gives performance gains and it allows for more of a true cold air setup. And like I mentioned earlier, this particular intake does not require a tune, which means that you can just bolt it on and go if you want to. But if you're looking for gains and improvements in drivability, then just know that any improvements that you'll see from the intake can be greatly amplified by running a tune, just as a side note. And looking at the price for this intake, I was very surprised to note that it costs under $300, especially after seeing its performance on the dyno and seeing things like the cold air feed and the larger filter. For the install, it's nothing too difficult, and the intake will come with all of the items that you'll need, including clamps, couplers, and hardware. All you really need to complete the install is a 10mm, a flathead for the plastic pins, and some pliers to remove the hose clamps. This is probably one of the easiest mods that you can tackle with your new Mustang and will probably take about a half hour to an hour tops, and I'm going to call it a 1 out of 3 wrenches on our scale. At the start of the install, you should disconnect the breather hoses from the inlet tube. Then just remove the 10mm bolt on the airbox that holds it into the inner fender well and pull the airbox completely out of the car. Loosen the clamps on the inlet tube at the throttle body and the airbox, and then remove the inlet tube. Then you're going to want to remove the steel bushing and the 2 rubber grommets from the stock airbox and retain them for the new airbox. You're also going to want to remove the rubber isolator from the bottom of the stock airbox tray as well. After that, you're going to want to ready your new airbox by installing the rubber grommets and the isolator onto the new airbox. Then install the weather stripping seal on the top of the airbox. Before you install the airbox into the car, just add the snorkel and that thing just clips into place. Put the filter assembly into place and bolt it to the box using the provided hardware. Next, you're going to want to connect the air intake tube to the filter. You put your clamp on first, and then just slide the filter over and tighten the clamp down. Now you're ready to get the air box into the car, starting with the air duct sliding into the factory location, and reinstall the factory bolt to hold it down. Install the intake tube by sliding it over the top of the air filter first, and then onto the throttle body. Leave all of the clamps loose until everything is lined up and seated, and then tighten down all of the clamps. Then all you have to do is reconnect the factory hoses to the inlet tube. Wrapping things up here, this intake from Roush is a great quality option that fits and looks great and gives good performance gains when paired with the tune. It has a large reusable air filter, and the housing taps into the factory cold air duct. The intake, when paired with the tune, is certainly going to increase power and improve the drivability of the S550 V6, and you can check it out more for yourself online right here at AmericanMuscle.com.